In this episode, we go to Salem, famous for its witches, and we show you the real location where those witches were put to death, a location that was lost for hundreds of years. Welcome back to the channel. We are in Boston, and Salem is around about an hour's long boat ride from Boston. We were hosted impeccably as we went to visit this historical location on the east coast of Massachusetts. We arrived in Salem and walked into the town from the marina, but we took a slight detour because we wanted to go off the beaten track and see what it was like to live in a town renowned for its witches. There were lots of original wooden houses dating to the early 1800s, but its history goes back much further than that. It goes back to 1692, in fact, when it was originally founded. And of course, as you can see, this town is very closely linked to witches and Halloween, and it has a very strong tourist connection with those events. But we are going to go off the tourist track. We're going to take you to the original historical locations. Our story will begin in 1692 with the Salem Witch Trials, which resulted in 25 deaths in total, 19 hanged and 1 pressed to death by stones. Yes, you heard that right. In 1692, Giles Corey was a successful farmer in Salem when a group of girls and young women started accusing locals of bewitching them with spectres. Giles actually attended some of the first trials that took place, until his wife Martha was quickly accused of witchcraft herself. Abigail Hobbs, another accused of witchcraft, then named Giles Corey as a wizard, believe it or not. Martha denied the accusations, but Giles would not enter a plea either way. He knew that if he pled, it would lead to a trial, and if the trial happened, his estate would be taken away from his family after his execution. According to the law at the time, those who did not make a plea could not be tried. And this is an extract from the diary of Samuel Sewell, one of the judges of the Salem Witchcraft Trials, and his entry for the 19th of September, 1692 reads as follows. Monday, September 19th, 1692, about noon at Salem, Giles Corey was pressed to death for standing mute. Much pains was used with him 2 days, one after another, by the court and captive gardener of Nantucket, who had been his acquaintance, but all in vain. After he would not plead, Giles Corey was asked to strip naked and lay down face up on the ground. A wooden board was then placed on top of him, and on top of that board, one by one, Sheriff George Corwin placed large rocks. After 2 days of this torture, through which Giles had remained silent, never once crying out, he was asked to plead guilty. He remained silent. On the third day, 19th of September, 1692, he died from being pressed to death. His last words were "more weight." Right, so we come to the Howard Street Cemetery, which is where Giles Corey suffered slightly different death to all those we've just seen up on the hill. Giles Corey was crushed to death because he refused to talk during his trial. He refused to admit that he was a witch, because obviously he fucking wasn't. And he refused to comment about any of the other people accused. Now, it's said that this marker here is where he was laid on the ground naked. He had a board placed over his chest, and large rocks were placed on his chest until he died, and he had more and more weight placed on every couple of hours or so until he passed away. And it took him 2 days to die, and his final words were allegedly "more weight." And apparently it happened right here, but if you look online, it also says that it may have been slightly to the side right here. So Giles Corey, who is in his 80s, was accused of being a witch, and he remained silent. Now, why did he remain silent? Now, it's purely because he could then pass down his lands and his possessions to his son-in-law, rather than the government confiscate his property, which is what would happen if you admitted to being a witch. It's quite mad, isn't it? We're now going to go to a memorial in Salem, which is for those people who were hanged of witchcraft. But the hangings did not actually take place in this location. In fact, nobody knew where the hangings took place until very recently. And if you stick around, I'm going to take you to the exact spot where those hangings took place. These victims were all hanged, and I'm going to give you a little bit of information about each of them.
The witches were hanged, really, or where any of them were hanged, until 2016. Not until then, it becomes Salem.
Margaret Scott, 77 years old, a poor widow and the last person from Rowley to be accused.
Where was it, though? No one knows. Yes, people council Proctor.
William Redd, age unknown, the only person from Marblehead executed during the trials.
Outside of Walgreens. That's right. We did come back to Walgreens.
Anne Pudita, 70 years old, a widow and midwife, executed as part of the final group. Mary Parker, 40 years old, claimed her arrest was a case of mistaken identity. Alice Parker, age unknown, accused by Mary Warren, executed with the final group. Mary Eastley, 58 years old, her loving farewell petition to the court brought many to tears. Martha Corey, 72 years old. She was the last woman executed, crying out, "Ye are all against me." John Proctor, 61 years old, he wrote a letter from prison stating the community was enraged and incensed against all of us by the delusions of the devil. George Jacobs, 83 years old, he told his accusers, "You tax me for a wizard, you may as well tax me for a buzzard." Martha Carrier, 49 years old, defiantly told the court, "It is a shameful thing that you should mind these folks that are clearly out of their wits." The Reverend George Burroughs, 42 years old, recited the Lord's Prayer perfectly, which moved the crowd as witches were supposedly unable to do so. Sarah Wilde, 65 years old, consistently maintained her innocence until death. Rebecca Nurse, 71 years old, defended her character. "I am as innocent as the child unborn." Sarah Martin, also 71 years old, said at the gallows, "I have no hand in witchcraft." Elizabeth Howe, 57 years old, she said, "If it was the last moment I was to live, God knows I am innocent." Sarah Good, 39 years old, famously told the Reverend, "I am no more a witch than you are a wizard, and if you take my life, God will give you blood to drink." Bridget Bishop, 60 years old, she said, "I am no witch, I am innocent, I know nothing of it." And of course you remember Giles Corey, pressed to death. His last words, "More weight." Reading these phrases on the floor, which it's alleged the victims actually said during their trials or before they died, is really quite touching, especially when you see all the other people stopping to read them. So now heading to the actual hanging location, where up to 19 people perished based on the lies, fears and hysteria of those mainly young women and girls who experienced strange fits and claimed to be tormented by spectral figures, which then led to them accusing their neighbours of witchcraft. Now, some of the accusers were as young as 9 years old, And those accusers helped to end people's lives. It's really quite shocking when you think of it in those terms. Now, the houses around here are absolutely beautiful, and it's a really nice area of the East Coast, and we enjoyed our visit. But we couldn't help thinking how busy this place would be at Halloween, but also how beautiful it would look in the winter with some snow. So we're now at Proctor's Ledge, the real location where the hangings took place. And this place is far quieter than the memorial which you see in town, which is about 2k away. This location was actually lost for hundreds of years, and it wasn't uncovered until 2016. But even this location is not where the gallows was located. But that's because there was no gallows. The accused were hanged from a prominent tree on a rocky outcrop. And I'll see if I can find that location for you right now. Now, this is the rocky outcrop where the hanging tree was located, but the tree is no longer there. But amongst these crags and in the shallow peaty soil is where they buried the accused, obviously not permitted to be buried in a Christian cemetery. Under the cover of night, families would come back to this location, remove the bodies from the crags and from the shallow soil, and then they would rebury their loved ones somewhere else in secret. Now, I've been to battlefields all over the world, whether they are World War I or World War II battlefields in Europe. I've been to North Africa, I've been to prisoner of war camps in Asia, and Civil War sites in America. Now, those places certainly have a feel about them, a type of energy, and I have to say, this place feels just like that. We need to head back to our ferry, so we're going to head down Chestnut Street and we're going to head towards town to enjoy a beer or two. If you enjoyed this video, why not leave a like and a comment, as it shows YouTube that this video is worth sharing with other people. And if you enjoyed American history, why not check out our series on the American Revolution, where we get behind the scenes access to the most popular historical sites on the East Coast of America. Next up, we head to Gettysburg for a series before we go back to the battlefields of World War II. Until next time.